If you feel like you want financial freedom, but you're like, I'm not sure what type of deals would actually allow me to achieve that. I need an action plan. Well, that is exactly what we're going to cover in this episode.
The DealMachine REI Podcast. Everything you need to know to get started in real estate investing.
Ryan, actually, he started his real estate investing journey in 2019 after taking a 30-day challenge and quitting his sales job and finding his first deal in 14 days and making $8,500. Is that right? In Kansas City, Missouri.
Yep, you got it.
I really wanted to retire when I was 40, Ryan. That was a huge motivation for me. And I realized one thing that was really helpful would be to have some passive income. If I could make my passive income coming in from rental properties, for example, exceed what my living expenses were at the time, which at the time was like $3,000 a month. So, that was very doable, it seemed like. Then I would be able to do whatever I want. And I could, be more bold at my job because I have to worry about getting fired or what the repercussions would be from there, take more risks, etc. And so I went searching for cash flowing rental property. I looked at what was on the market and I kind of ran out of properties that would cash flow. And so I needed to do some other stuff. That's exactly what we're going to talk about today. If you guys have wondered, I really want to get financial freedom, but I'm not sure where to start. I'm not sure what type of deals to go look for. I need action plans. Well, this episode, we're actually going to give you step-by-step on how Ryan and I both got started. We're going to talk about all the different types of lead generations and then hone in on the ones that we know best. Ryan, would you mind if I just maybe went through the 7, 8, 9 common things for real estate investing? And then I'd really love it for you to dive in on the one that you know the best as kind of like a follow through. You've got rundown houses, which is called driving for dollars. You've got looking at leads on the MLS and Zillow. And I think this is a great place to start. It's definitely where I started. And the best thing is because you can do it from your house in secret. When you're nervous about what people might think when they find out you're trying to be a real estate investor, you don't have to worry about all that. You can just pull up Zillow and you can start looking at deals that way. I know that's what I did. And the quick calculation that I would do, I would say, does this property that is for sale for $100,000, would it meet what's called the 1% rule, which means could I rent it for $1,000 a month? And I knew that was just like a quick way to figure out if a deal would be a possible deal. And what I was finding, Ryan, was the answer was no a lot of times. I would look at a lot of houses and it might be for sale for $200,000, but the rent might only be like $1,100. And, Zillow's not always right, but it does have a Zestimate. And I could also flip to houses that were actually, they have a rent Zestimate as well, by the way. So that would estimate what it would rent for. And then I could flip it to look for a rental property, and I would see what houses similar to it were being advertised for. So very quickly I could tell if the house would cash flow. And that's a great exercise to get into doing. The other ways is you can actually go get a list of certain properties that are vacant. That are in pre-foreclosure, which means maybe they are behind on their payments. And if they're behind for 90 days, then the mortgage company or the bank will send out a public notice to everyone to let everyone know, hey, this house is behind on payments. They haven't caught up yet. Now, they still have a chance to catch up. And that's often why, as a real estate investor, when you get in touch with those pre-foreclosures, they might take a deal, give you the ability to pay off their mortgage and take their house for a discount. But that's what the pre-foreclosure list will help you with. You got absentee owned properties. I mean, that's kind of also called tired landlords. They've owned it for 10 plus years and they're an absentee owner. Maybe they're getting tired of the expenses. Expired listings, which means they didn't sell the house on the MLS. And you could add a filter there too of they've got at least 35% equity. So there's room for me to make a lower offer. And then the equity means if the house is worth $100,000, they only owe 70. So that would be 30% equity. The list goes on. And I feel like you've got a lot to share on what you've done, Ryan. So could you tell us what's your journey in sorting through all these lead sources that people have and then can do and can get leads from as a real estate investor?
Yeah. So being in the 30-day wholesaling challenge to start out, it was 100% of driving for dollars. You had to go out and find 250 properties first. And that was going to be your list of leads. So your first batch list of leads was going to be driving for dollars. And we've honestly, to this day, we still go out and add driving for dollars leads in our community because the list can constantly change. It's a renewed list almost every month. There's another house that would fall onto that list.
And okay, yeah, for those that don't know, like what are some things that you look for when you are driving for dollars, which is another word for just looking for rundown houses? Can you pull out 10 bullet points of what you guys look for?
Yeah, and I'm going to go back to what we were looking at when we first started because it has changed over time. When we first started, I was looking for houses that had boarded up windows, stuffed mailboxes. I would look for houses that didn't have, like in our area, gas meters obviously meant that there was no gas to the house. So those were the things that I was looking for. Broken windows, boarded up windows. I mean, you could go and look at the condition of roof, is if there's shingles falling off the house, or if there's a ton of debris on the front porch or in the yard. Like, you're looking at any symptom that would indicate that this house is not lived in. If it's got boards over the windows, clearly there's probably not somebody living there. If the mailbox is full of mail, there's probably not somebody living there because it's not getting checked. If there's no gas meter and it's in the middle of winter, probably not anybody living there. And if there is somebody living there, maybe it's an electric furnace instead. Tall grass and not well manicured yard. If there's just trash piled up on the front porch, those are the symptoms that we first looked for. So we would drive every block in our community looking for houses that would match that list of criteria. So if it's boarded up window, bam, I'm adding that. If it's tall grass, I'm adding that. And we actually started in the winter. So some of the symptoms that we were looking for, like unshoveled, sidewalks, look for footsteps from the house to the mailbox. If there's no footsteps and it's a full mailbox, then nobody's checking that. There's always those given symptoms of boarded up windows, stuffed mailboxes, distressed roofing. Those are the easy ones. But in time, you'll start identifying other things. When the spring comes around and you see that the yard hasn't been mowed in 6 weeks, then hey, that's nobody's taking care of this house. It's not being maintained. So that list just changes. It's a seasonal list, but in time, what we have seen in our community is houses have come up. They've come up because of how many houses we've gone out and flipped, or how many investors we've brought into St. Joe that have increased and bettered the properties. So our lens of what is distress has changed. Now it's like, when was the last time that house was painted? When are those windows, or those vinyl windows, or those still metal frame or wood frame windows? That's a 3-tab roof versus an architectural type shingle. So it changes. And even if you're not in a market that has as much distress as we had, then your lens is going to probably be a little bit more like, hey, that's got chipped paint all over it, or hey, the yard isn't mowed, So I would say those are the most common symptoms that we still to this day kind of hone in on.
So your lens has changed as you've gotten into this habit of looking for distressed properties. And it's a list that you continually refresh and look for, because let's say an ice storm just happened and knocked down a tree limb, and then 2-3 weeks go by and nobody's cleaned up that tree yet. And then you realize, oh, that's because nobody's home in this house. What is the situation where this house has a tree that's fallen maybe on the house itself, yet nobody's cleaned that up? And so that's what you're saying is, like, things happen frequently. And so keeping an eye out for these types of houses that have something wrong with them, or they look a little bit less than the rest in the neighborhood, has really been important for your business.
Yeah, it's been huge. And that's the thing is, like, you can go out and drive 1 week and add 250 leads, but next week there's going to be, 20 more or 15 more. And so that has to be, we all know consistency in anything is key. If you want to be good at something, you have to be consistent with it. Muscle memory, you have to continue to do things that are going to create a pattern. So even if you added 250 driving for dollars leads to get started, go out the next week and go and look for more, even in the same areas, because you don't know what can change over the course of a week or 2 weeks. It's an ever evolving list. There's new leads that pop up on that driving for dollars list that you can just continue to add.
Yeah, there's a lot of different ways to generate leads. As I kind of rambled off at the beginning of this episode, there's even more. And so you started with this method, which was looking for distressed houses, aka driving for dollars, mainly because you took a challenge and that was just what they told you to do, right?
I literally did not know anything about anything wholesale before the 30-day challenge. So for me, it was laid out. You got to go do this, this, and this.
Got it. Okay, cool. So on my path, I was really interested in analyzing deals. So I was looking on the MLS, like I said. What I ended up finding was this house that I was going to buy myself, and it was like $4,000. And so it wouldn't rent for $1,900 at the time, but I knew I was going to live in it and rent out 3 bedrooms. And so that was going to generate, $500 a bedroom plus me living in it for free. I was like, oh, okay, it's about $2,000. So that does kind of meet the 1% rule. So that's how I made my choice on how to get my first house. And so I was renting at the time and looking for a real estate deal. And I was like a little bit nervous to make my own offer because I had never done that before. And I was like, why don't I just buy a house and house hack? And I had to put like $4,800 down just to get this house and change my situation. So I really didn't have to pay any living expenses because the mortgage with the taxes and insurance was $1,300. Renting out to my coworkers, that was bringing in $1,500. And so that was my first move there. And that's how I briefly analyzed it, was using that 1% rule on Zillow. I did buy one more on Zillow, but all this is to say, then I kind of ran out of houses that would really cash flow and be a good deal on Zillow, because if they're listed on the market, there may be a few exceptions, but most of them are going to be in good condition and not really allow you as a real estate investor to add value or have enough difference between what the mortgage payment would be and what the actual rent could command. And so that's why you have to go beyond Zillow and beyond the agents to look for other leads. And rundown houses are a prime candidate, because if something happened in their life where they needed to get rid of the house, they would need to turn to an investor to get rid of that quickly. And that's exactly the proposition that you're giving them, right? It's like, it's kind of like a pawn shop. They're getting rid of the house. They know they're not getting the top dollar, but they'd rather just get rid of it and get the cash and move on to whatever the next thing is in their life.
Thanks for listening to the DealMachine Real Estate Investing Podcast. Please leave us a review and follow along wherever you're listening to your podcast.